we would end up getting charged. But the government would get a black eye over this because what they did is, and this was access to information, showed that Health Canada knew that they were going to create a crisis even before they seized the product at the border, preventing 3,000 Canadians from having it. And so they set up a 1-800 crisis line, which same type of thing, basically calling it a drug, or not basically, they're actually saying the scripting was, as soon as somebody said, hey, I was taking Truehope products, what's up? And they'd get kicked over to this crisis line because they knew that it was going to really negatively impact Canadians' lives. And so they were already going into damage control and trying to redirect the populace, thinking that they could avert the damages. Yeah. And so literally, this is constituting criminal negligence at this point in time, and in many instances resulting in death. I mean, the company's called Truehope, and yet a lot of people weren't referring to us as Truehope. They were actually referring to us as Last Hope, because they'd already exhausted everything available in the medical system, and their game plan was, I'm just going to take my life. They stumble across us and say, I'm willing to give one last try. And then they would try it, they get off the medications, they get their lives back, and all of a sudden Health Canada comes and removes it.
Hello all and welcome to a very special collaborative episode today between Truehope Cast, the official podcast of Truehope Canada, and the Purica Swallow the Truth podcast. This episode marks the first of many conversations between Purica and Truehope, two Canadian companies that have walked very similar paths in the natural health space, and when many within the industry have stayed quiet or stepped back through controversy, Purica and Truehope chose to stand firm, becoming vocal champions for natural health choice, freedom and informed consent in Canada. Together, these companies represent and speak for the nearly 80% of Canadians who rely on natural health products as part of their wellness journey. And in part one of this two-part conversation, Jason and David go deep into the origins and evolution of Purica and Truehope, the personal convictions that shaped their missions, and the early challenges of building science-based natural health companies in a system often resistant to change. This is a candid, unfiltered discussion about leadership, courage, and what it truly means to advocate for health freedom. Nothing is really off limits, everything is rooted in real experience, and everything is, as always, 100% natural. Enjoy the show.
Hello, welcome to this podcast. This is a joint collaborative podcast. I'm Jason Watkin, representing the Swallow the Truth podcast.
And I'm David Stephan, representing Truehope Cast, which is the official podcast of Truehope Canada.
So the two of us have known each other for, you said 23?
Oh boy, it's been a while.
23 years. So since, how old was I then? Let's be 2000. So I was 32. Yeah, I guess I was 32 at the time, and you were 20. And we met through these pretty extreme circumstances through David's daughter, Tony. So we basically were this podcast, between our two podcasts, I feel like the force of what's coming in the future, that we'll be collaborating a lot because we have the same rebellious spirit. But we want to share our stories of what's happened, say, with government overregulation, but also how intense and severe it can be, especially when you feel like you're sharing something really good and then you get some kind of monolithic force, it feels like, coming at you and trying to stop you and say horrible things to you and do whatever they did. But then how long it can keep going when you stand up. But again, in the end, like we like to do on our podcast, I'm same as yours, is the silver lining idea. Like what comes out of this? And we both have a lot of confidence, faith that things are going to be pretty spectacular, but it's not going to be without some really intense, maybe horrific things coming at us, which you see all over the world. But we want to keep this podcast about, okay, what are things that we feel are really helpful and what's coming on? So what do you want to start with?
Yeah, it's interesting that our journeys have really crossed paths because of the circumstances that we found ourselves in. Not circumstances that we created of our own accord, really, but that found themselves on our doorsteps. And so, yeah, it was through my father that we came together in a joint effort back in the early 2000s surrounding Health Canada's treachery, if you will, against the Canadian people in trying to destroy these solutions that we had come up with that were really blessing a lot of Canadians' lives. In fact, saving lives
Yeah, absolutely. And so for us, it was, and David will get into his story. I'll try to truncate this thing because it's pretty convoluted. But we were promoting, as our company Purica, we were promoting recovery, which at the time it barely got a name because it was being given out for years to animals and people with serious autoimmune conditions, things like that. So we were just so happy because we weren't from a business family or anything. And all these people, including my brother, my dad, all these people having unbelievable results. And then we got raided by the RCMP and Health Canada officials. And they said that we're a drug, and they put CBC and Health Canada, the Health Canada coordinated with CBC and the government, the Prime Minister's office, to put out this hit piece on us called Recovery the Drug Continued. And then we were like, what the heck's going on? And they're trying to rate us, saying that our product is a drug and everything, because there was no proper regs back then. So it was semantics, is a naming that they're trying to say we're a drug. That freaked people out, all the rheumatologists and the orthopedic surgeons that were recommending recovery, and the vets, all of a sudden, what, they're putting a drug in their product? Like, what? So as a family, we were true CBC believers, and the government's awesome, Canada's awesome. And it just overnight, as we went further and further down this rabbit hole, we learned that 2 drug companies in the States, there was a presentation by rheumatologists and other people in Ottawa that went into the States about how recovery was working with autoimmune type progression in these serious conditions. And they didn't like it. So they put out a piece, approach to FDA, Health Canada, that this recovery is a drug and it needs to come off the market. They need to do a application called an investigative new drug, IND. And it was going to cost millions and millions of dollars for that. And then you have to take your product off the market for 5 years, do all this research when it's just all this. Anyway, we couldn't believe it because what is happening? And then that's what happened to us. And then I guess they didn't know. And we both share the same lawyer, Sean Buckley, in the end. He came later on in our case after it was a 6-year case. And I just saw that the media lies. There was so much lying. It was unbelievable. We were there. We saw it, and they took pieces out of context. I was literally so naive at that point. I thought, what is going on? And then we came to the point where I guess our lawyer, Sean Buckley, and probably the same with your dad, Tony, and David, is that we're like that character, which I was explaining to you before. Back in the 70s, we had that little toy that was like, Humpty Dumpty, little egg thing with the weighted. The Weebles, a lot of you are going to know. The Weebles wobble and they don't fall down. So basically, they hit us with everything they had to try to destroy us quickly. They hit us just before Christmas to try to stress us out to the max. We only had one product, and they seized everything. So they knew, we're dead. But we had our animal side, luckily, the horses and dogs. And so that saved us, but it also ignited something in me that I guess they didn't know existed because I'd never really exposed it before. And that's to you when you're telling your story, is we went through 6 years battle. They got caught in access to information, Health Canada at the time, certain employees that were spreading false information to the Department of Justice. So the case was quickly dropped after 6 years and a ton of money spent. And the senior lawyer came, he actually shook my hand, and it was in front of my mom and dad, and said, this shit never should have gone to case, and we're to court. We're sorry. That's after 6 years of like intense stress, and everybody in our company thinking we're going to lose everything. We weren't allowed to advertise, but it kept growing just by results. So we were lucky because we actually had a product that worked really well. Other than that, we would have been dead. They knew they would have got us, and that's why they hit us at Christmas too, for maximal stress exposure. That's when I met when I met your dad.
Before you jump into that though, you just brought up something that you say you're really lucky that you had a product that actually worked so that it, continued to propel forward. But I'm going to put it forward that you would have never gone through that situation had you not had a product that worked.
Yes, 100%. This is what blows your mind too, is that I think this boils down to, they wouldn't do that. No. And I even thought that, like, I thought they wouldn't do that. So they wouldn't do that. What's going on here? It's almost like you think, they have false information, or they just think the worst of people sometimes. No, it's definitely like a hit piece on a company that competes against the drug industry. And then it was really interesting because as you go down these rabbit holes, I want you to tell your story because we're so aligned, and your dad and I know each other so long, is that you realize that the collusion between industry and parts of government is horrific, and it's been ongoing for a long time. And I had no idea until you go down the rabbit holes. And my mind, like your mind, you want to go deeper and deeper and deeper to try to get to at least some type of root. I know we're playing 5D chess in the world. It's hard to figure out the moves, but at least get to some semblance of a fact. And then when you get really deep, you realize that there's literally certain groups that have a ton of power and money, whatever, that manipulate and capture industry and capture government, and they all work together, and it's really convoluted and whacked. And I love the idea when you start calling that conspiracy theory. Everybody, you start laughing at that. First you start getting defensive. It's not a conspiracy theory. Then you just realize, no, it's just ahead of the game. And in a couple of months or a couple of weeks or a couple of days sometimes, they're going to find that's true. So instead of taking it personally and getting upset when you learn a new fact, right, which we've all been through that intense, is instead just wait a few days or weeks and it'll all prove itself. But that, unfortunately, that's true because it feels you get disheartened, right? But at the same time, you're disheartened, but you're also, as you get more used to it, you're thinking more and more people are learning different types of truths that are more real than the news and everything putting out. And why is that happening? And then you think, oh, something good is actually happening. And like you said, but it's going to create that wounded tiger effect when you said they wouldn't be after you unless it did work and competed against them. Mm-hmm. But I'm talking whole paradigm changes. I'm talking complete shifts in education. We talk about complete shift in medicine, complete shift in the whole idea that politics will be your savior. They're not your savior. Obviously, we saw that. No party, once they get in power, the bureaucracy keeps running through. Yeah, because they're all captured. And then you think, why do they never do what they say they're going to do when you vote them in? Yeah, because they're captured.
They're beholden. Exactly. They're beholden to basically a shadow government, if you will. Yeah. That was, a big paradigm shaker for us, that particular element. Now, we knew that there was corruption in the government before anything ever happened to us. So, to align with, how our journeys came together. And I want more detail from you because I've heard it from my dad's side. Yes, I've never actually heard it from your side. My father makes a discovery with him and David Hardy that proper vitamin mineral supplementation can completely correct mental health conditions, right? And a lot of that was coming from the agricultural sciences, where healthy animals are actually profitable, whereas unhealthy humans are very profitable for a particular industry, right? Yep. And so the discoveries made, my family is restored because we're plagued with severe mental health conditions, like complete crazy mental health conditions and multiple suicides. My mother took her life in 1994. My grandfather took his life in the late 70s. And I had siblings. Out of my 8 siblings, myself included, we're on that same path, going down that road where suicide or homicide or something explosive was going to happen. And frequent visits to the psych wards with my older sister, et cetera, et cetera. And so the discovery's made, and it makes it onto the news, and it really makes it onto the news after the first study came out of the University of Calgary in October of 2000, and it went national. And literally the next day, Health Canada came swooping in, shut down any of the further studies. At that point in time, there was a double-blind placebo-controlled trial that was scheduled to take place out of the University of Calgary again.
So was that Bonnie Kaplan?
Bonnie Kaplan was the one that was going to head up that study. And the funder of the study was actually the Alberta government, $544,000. And Health Canada comes in and says, And so they shut it down. And then same thing, all of a sudden we're a drug. And it wasn't based on the ingredients. It was based on the application. You could not help somebody with bipolar disorder in Canada with vitamins and minerals without it being classified as a drug. Even though it's literally vitamins and minerals.
Recovery was same idea.
Yep. And so then my dad tried to work with them, thinking, there was a bit of naivety there. And he's like, hey, how do I get the drug identification number? I'll work with you. Yeah. And it finally came clear at one point in time, after about a year of attempting to work with Health Canada, that one of the agents told him, they just said, Mr. Stephan, if you want to continue doing what you're doing, you might want to move south of the border. Right? Like how perverse is that this incredible... Open oh, absolutely. Saying it doesn't matter that it has any merit.
No.
You're just not welcome to do this in Canada. This discovery, this phenomenal discovery in the field of mental health is not welcome in Canada, and Canadians aren't welcome to have access to it. And so that at that point in time, my father was actually looking at moving, him and David Hardy. And I remember I was in my later high school years. And I'm thinking grade 11, I'm moving down to Utah. Really? Because that's where they were going to relocate.
Yeah.
And it looked like it was a go. Looked like we were 2 months away from moving type thing. And I was planning it out and thinking, how's my life going to be? And how's the snowboarding? Right.
Yeah.
And so I was, that's where my mind was at that point in time. And then things turned. And my father dug in his heels and said, I'm not going to let some bureaucrat in Ottawa tell me whether or not I can bless the lives of other Canadian families like my family's been blessed. And so he just started to ignore their cease and desist orders. And finally, by early 2003, they came in and seized all the product at the border because it was getting produced in the States. Yep. And then they came in when things started to heat up and protests started to happen. That's when they responded with a RCMP SWAT team, came and raided us at gunpoint. And then that's when I believe all the connections were made.
They came and raided our manufacturing facility and seized everything and blocked it. And it was pretty brutal.
Like taped it off and raided.
Yeah, everything was blocked. And we only had that one human product just to recover that because we didn't intend to be a company ever. So it's like, just yay. And not realizing, oh my God, we don't have anything left.
So I've heard the story from my father's side. So my understanding is that you phoned my dad at one point when all this went down with Health Canada.
Yes, because through the organization, the Friends of Freedom, who then we were actually lobbying in Ottawa at the time. So we familiar with all the different Paul Martin, Stephen Harper, Jack Layton, talked to him, and the Speaker of the House. We were there several times. Anyways, ours was, we got covered 2 lengthy things on CBC Health Matters by this guy that's a definite liar. Like the things he told was, that's what blew my mind. Anyway, so we didn't know what to do. And the idea was they came in, they seized everything. When they seized everything, there were literally people under their desks hiding, including so much fear because the RCMP was there, all these enforcement people, and they acted like we were criminals, 100% criminals. And all we were doing was producing a product that now is completely fine. Trying to make it look like we're criminals. And then they put hit pieces to make it look like we're these unethical hit pieces. And then I started to realize all of them are unethical. And then they even when we went to these pharmacy shows, when we were presenting, they call themselves, they basically hijacked the term ethicals. They call themselves ethicals, implying that anything outside the pharmaceutical realm is unethical. So I thought, okay, then my mind is always in psychology and all this deep philosophy, and it ended up spiraling me into a comparative religion philosophy for years and years. But I thought, okay, all of these psychological manipulative techniques are used. And the idea of social engineering to put all these hit pieces to get public support, to make it then look like even people who knew us and thought we're the really nice people and everything, oh my God, underneath, we didn't know them. Making it look like we're the bad. So going through all these years, they came in, they then seized the product. People were fleeing the building because it was so scary for all the people working and people hiding under desks the entire time for hours that were there. I was trying to constantly give them evidence of things we had been giving to them that they don't deal with. Like actual drugs and products in areas of Chinatown, because that's what they do in China. They mix drugs and different herbs because a lot of people in China won't accept pharmaceutical medicine without TCM added. So it's normal. Anyways, it's there. You're not regulating that, and you're trying to call us a drug, and you let real drugs be passed in just stores. Yep. So anyways, we're talking about that, and they wouldn't deal with it. And then we went, so they came in, seized everything. It's very stressful. The one fellow that we were working with, he was our VP at the time, Rod Sidoroff. He's now with Natural Factors. Mm-hmm. He was there. He was trying to play the good cop. Not trying to play it. He was being the good cop because I was getting a bit fiery because that's my nature. I get fiery if you're trying to do something that I think is wrong. So anyway, I was a bit fiery. I said, no, I'm sending this to the United States. You don't have any authority in the United States. So you can't do this. I want to talk to your boss. And then Rod's playing the good guy. And then finally they said, don't get so formal. Don't get so formal. It's not, just relax. And they seized everything. And it was the end of our company, right? We paid for all the stuff already. And then that hit Rod. And Rod's a tall guy, like 6'4". He stood up, he says, what are you saying? This is about people's mortgages, about people's livelihood. You come in here. We're not doing anything wrong. All the lies are coming through. Then they got really stressed because, we're both standing together. So that's how anyway, that ended. Then we had to go to court. Lengthy process. I was going down rabbit holes and never sleeping for like solid 7 days a week for years and what I learned, that's what we were talking about earlier. I just started learning about things because I saw so much corruption and lying, so much capture, and it was so in your face obvious. And every party that would be with you at once and you're lobbying, and then once they got in, same thing. And we talked about earlier, I thought, what is going on here? And then I realized, you realize hardcore, it comes so apparent. And then even the lawyers are looking at it saying, yeah, they put a hit on you. They want to destroy your company while you're still small enough to do that. And we tried mediation with them first. And we went, it's a government mediator. And it's us with our lawyers and Health Canada East and West divisions with their legal team. And we're all sitting at a table. And, you know, interesting enough, this is weird for anybody that has this thing, is Western Office Health Canada, the prefixes for their numbers are all 666. I thought that was weird.
Well, it's not weird.
Okay, right. So in the thing, finally, the mediator came to the point where he said to Health Canada, can we hold off for 1 sec? So he said to Health Canada, he said, so let me get this straight. So say if I have a grocery store and in the produce section, people are coming to buy the produce. And that's fine. And everyone knows that eating that is helpful to prevent against cancer, heart disease, skin, anti-aging, all that kind of thing. Everybody knows that, right? And even the National Cancer Institute at the time was putting out all that stuff all the time. 5 to 10 servings of fruit and vegetables per day is preventative against cancer, all these things, stroke and heart.
Right.
So anyway, he said, that's fine. But if you put a sign there that says eating 5 to 10 servings of fruit and vegetables per day, just like the National Cancer Institute and the Heart Foundation, all that, says in there is helpful to prevent and can support against your body against preventing against heart disease, cancer, stroke, whatever, then that would be considered a drug and you would have to have a pharmacist inside the produce section. But this is where it gets super funny. Without even batting an eye, the representative from Ottawa, the head woman that was there, she said, exactly. But the mediator was so floored in the room because he thought, what? And he couldn't believe that she was 100%. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. So they hadn't come there to mediate. They had come there to state their position and say, do it or that kind of thing.
Yep.
And then I started to realize, okay, this is interesting. We're going at this case the wrong way. And this is where I think that we need to change strategies in how we look at freedom. Is these people that work for government that just do as they're told, when they all said, I was just doing as I was told, I was just doing what I was supposed to. Give me a break, please. That's how societies fall. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I thought, okay, you're just doing as you're told. You're collaborating with the thing that you don't morally agree with, ethically agree with. You know it's intellectually wrong. You know it's morally wrong. And so I thought, you keep on going after the top guys, but they always have all these gatekeepers.
Yep.
So I was saying to our lawyer at the time, can't we go after the people that are in the room with us, the people that are communicating on emails with us, which are the low ones on the totem pole? And they basically saying, well, we don't do that. Why would you want to do that? And my philosophy is because I think that people that follow rules that they know are wrong over and over and over again that hurt other people are cowards.
Yes.
So there's a cowardice, and I'm sorry, not they're cowards. There's cowardice there that needs to be changed, but it's hard to change that because they see you as an enemy.
Yep.
Because now they're just doing as they're told, so now you're the enemy. So if you go after them, this is my idea. I thought it worked. If you go after the lowest people in the totem pole, then they can't hack that.
Right.
They need to be thought of a certain way, so they will turn on the one above them.
Yeah, you create
and above
dissension
them.
in the ranks.
Nobody wants to be included in it. They're just doing as they're told. And government is a perfect kind of stage to do this. So then we did that, and then it was so after 6 years, their case was quickly falling apart, and then we got access to information to show that they were lying to the Department of Justice. Department of Justice was really angry. That's why they sent a lawyer to the Cowichan Valley in person, which they could have just dropped it over the phone because they were so upset that they had been lied to for 6 years, and this never wasted everybody's time, all the taxpayers' money.
Abusive process,
right?
Absolutely.
And then we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in this, all of our energies put into that, right? Which could have fried you and turned you into a cynical person. And if you try to go after the government then to recuperate that, you're just going after the taxpayer because everything the government's going to go, they're going to lose as a tax. So then you think, how can I do that too then? So you're thinking, okay, this whole game is set up for them to win, because even if you win, sort of, you try to recuperate what you lost. You can't unless you want to go after the taxpayer.
You just put a burden on, not even on the organization that
Right?
did the egregious actions. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that was our story. There's lots more in there, but I don't want to get too long. And I felt like we made it the David versus Goliath kind of thing. We did it by being a weeble.
Yeah.
And then I learned that saying that I love, and I always say it. It's a quote I heard. I think her name was Michelle Walker, said, "Those of you that think you're too small to make a difference obviously have not been in bed with a mosquito." And I thought, if we're just all become mosquitoes, and that doesn't mean nasty. I'm talking about just be yourself and buzz.
Persistent.
And then we all will light up together. And I feel like, you know what? The beauty of that, it's happening, but we ended up having to go through another even bigger one after, because the government doesn't like to lose. Even though they know they're wrong, they don't want to lose, because it makes it look like, oh, other people are going to try this. So they tried it again, and I'll let you go with your story, and then we can go with both of our even bigger. But let me hear from you, your side, what year?
Well,
you were 20 at the time, and I know your dad's side.
Yeah, so I'd just come into the organization and was taking over all the video work, which was quite serendipitous because there wasn't a huge demand for video work at that point in time until all of a sudden all the Health Canada stuff rolled out a month later. So I literally came in right as this whole debacle began. And so I'm collaborating with everyone else on the team, and I'm bringing in all of this news and stuff like that, and putting out videos. We'd put, at that time it was VHS often. Most people weren't rolling with DVD players yet. And so anyways, that's how I walked into this. And right before the raid took place, which was just phenomenal timing. So this is now 2003. And we would end up getting charged. But the government would get a black eye over this, because what they did is, and this was access to information, showed that Health Canada knew that they were going to create a crisis. Even before they seized the product at the border, preventing 3,000 Canadians from having it. And so they set up a 1-800 crisis line, which same type of thing, basically calling it a drug, or not basically, they're actually saying, the scripting was, as soon as somebody said, hey, I was taking Truehope products, what's up? And they'd get kicked over to this crisis line.
This is where you and your dad and I talked, because they set up crisis lines for both Recovery and for Empower Plus.
Okay, so, and because they knew that it was going to really negatively impact Canadians' lives. And so they were already going into damage control and trying to redirect the populace, thinking that they could avert the damages. Yeah. And so literally, this is constituting criminal negligence at this point in time, and in many instances resulting in death.
We're talking depressive disorder and bipolar and things like that David is not mentioning it, but that is basically what we're dealing with here, which is obviously a crisis now, and it even was back then. So this is big, what was going on.
And the irony is, the company's called Truehope. And yet a lot of people weren't referring to us as Truehope. They were actually referring to us as Last Hope, because they'd already exhausted everything available in the medical system. And their game plan was, I'm just going to take my life. They stumble across us and say, I'm willing to give one last try. And then they would try it. They get off the medications, they get their lives back, and all of a sudden Health Canada comes and removes it. And they're saying, I'm not going back to where I was going to kill myself. And so this was a sentiment of quite a few of the people that we were working with, because we were only at that point in time working with people in the worst of situations, the most dire circumstances. Now, that's not the case. We supply it through health food stores alongside you. And so they get over 1,000 phone calls, and their scripting is, you'll no longer have access to this dangerous drug. Go back to your doctor and get on, right? And right, basically go back to the psych ward. Get back in line, go back to status quo, right? We're looking out for your best interest. Like, that's the irony of it.
Same strategy and tactics.
Exactly. And so they finally, after enough pressure, and the media wasn't entirely on their side at this point in time. CBC was. CBC always was.
For sure. Same with us.
Yeah, but that's a Crown-owned organization.
Absolutely. People don't realize that they're just getting government propaganda. I think there's some do, but the ones that don't realize it, because it used to be different than it is.
Yeah.
Right? Can I segue for one sec? Hold your thought?
Yeah.
When I was a kid in the 70s and you watched the news, they just reported what was on. For anybody that's old enough to see that, they just reported what was happening around the world. They didn't put their opinions on it or slants. It was just reading the news. In Afghanistan today, such and such happened and this happened. They didn't act like they were on a certain side. They were just reciting what happened that day. It could be on the radio or on TV. It's nothing like the news today. So when you think CBC was similar back then, now it's a totally different CBC. But if it's such a slow process, the people who used to think that CBC or Canada is this way, Canada and CBC are no longer this way at all. So,
no.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, and to qualify that, so my job was to actually gather up any news that was ever produced on us, good or bad.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is over the, basically the first decade till 2010, we had dozens of news articles coming out of Canada that were positive on us, coming from basically every major news corp other than CBC. Yeah. CBC would go out of their way to try to find negative news on us. And in fact, they had a correspondent down in Arizona do a story on us because some lady had an issue coming off of her medications and she ended up in withdrawal from the medication and was blaming us for it, even though it was the medication.
Yes, that's right.
And she was considering suing us. Well, we've had people consider suing us, but they've never ever had the grounds to do so. So we've never actually ended up in court over a single situation over the years, over 3 decades of doing this and helping literally about 100,000 people come off of psychiatric medications. But CBC went out of their way to drum up this story out of Arizona. They couldn't find one local. Yeah. And so it was like they were existing in an entirely different realm than global news at that time, CTV News, A Channel, all of that. They were all reporting positive stuff on us. Every time a new study would come out, they would report on it. And then something shifted at 2010 where it all went dry. No longer would anybody report on us. Double-blind study comes out. Nope, nobody's reporting on it. There was a shift in the media about 2010 where no longer could we draw from...
Well, you watch media capture. I know a lot of your audience is already familiar with this, is that they're buying up all the media. Mm-hmm. So the media is a conglomerate and it's not actually news anymore. And there's that case in New York where they tried to go against for defamation of character. And they said, you can't pursue with this case because it's not news, it's entertainment.
Yeah.
So people don't realize too, like CNN, all these things, they're considered entertainment now, not news. So then it's a different kind of story. So we're being entertained in a really negative way, like the fall of Rome, when they entertain you with death and destruction in the Colosseum. Is the idea is it's just a different form of the Colosseum, and the story is controlled to such an extent that it's almost unbelievable. But the beauty, obviously, is that mainstream media is falling away. And then all these different podcasters all over the world now are starting to move out and tell different stories. And then you think for yourself, because this is what we're trying to do, David and I, is to just tell our story. And then you decide for yourself. Sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but I want to mention that before you start again, is when you're talking about, for us, it's most of these serious anti-inflammatory and analgesic narcotic products. That's why there was an issue that people not having recovery might cause major problems.
Yep.
For you, some of the main classes would be the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, which don't treat depression. They agree with that in meta-analysis. They just numb you. And then they have the side effects of potential homicidal or suicidal behavior, which is what they're actually giving sometimes for. And then MAO inhibitors, things like that. And then a lot of other drugs. But I'm saying these are huge money makers in a realm where money is everything, because most of them are public companies, and that they have ties to government through family, friends, and that in public interest.
Revolving door between government
and then back
industry.
and forth with people. So we're talking about things that are entrenched and captured with industry and governance, that this is massive amounts of money that they do not want to let go of, and they have serious control mechanisms, including intensely crazy things that you would never ever believe, because it seems like some type of spy movie, but those things all exist to try to protect that industry, and everything's tied together as you go further. I know a lot of your guys, again, everything's tied together as you go further and further and further down. You see that there's a handful controlling a lot, like BlackRock, Vanguard, things like that. So we're telling our stories first, but so sorry, I cut you off for a second.
No, that's okay. So
I'm respecting the intensity of what your product does.
So going back to 2003, finally Health Canada had to relent, and they had to let it back across the border But this was after about a 6-7 month stint, right? Like this started in the earlier spring, and finally by late fall, they were opening the borders back up again to allow for...
That's what year did you say again?
2003.
Okay.
And so, unfortunately, though, according to Ron Lejeunesse, he's the head of the Alberta chapter of the Canadian Mental Health Association. He had been warning Health Canada about what their actions were doing to those that were mentally ill, because he personally knew of people that were in crisis from Health Canada removing access to this. Well, we fast forward 2 years because Health Canada would then charge us, and we'd end up in the courts with them. My father and David Hardy are charged criminally for supplying vitamins and minerals and helping people get their lives back. This is the strangeness of Canada. They're charged criminally for blessing people. Like, that's so backwards. It's entirely perverse, because it's only when you harm somebody that you can, in a real...
It's Orwellian.
Yeah.
You flip everything.
Yeah, you're helping people. What, you saved lives and now you're going to be a criminal? Weird. And so we get into court, and Ron Lejeunesse testifies that he personally attended 2 funerals of those who took their lives from Health Canada's actions. How many others across the whole country? Like, we have a database where people would phone us, we'd set up a file for them, and we would literally take them by the hand, in essence, like, and guide them through the process and be accessible to them by phone, thick or thin. Like, we're there for them to help them get through the process of coming off medications, custom tailoring protocols for them to come off. Maybe you're on a Fexer. Well, you're going to be counting beads. Pop the capsule open, take this many beads. It's how many you're taking today. And we're going to guide them through that process so as to limit or eliminate the withdrawal effects, so that they can get through this transition and get on the other side in a really good place. And now you have Health Canada removing our ability to do that. And we have 3,000 people in Canada. Well, after everything was said and done, we had 2,700 people. We don't know what happened to the other 300 people. We know from Ron Lejeunesse, his personal experience, and he's only one person, that he attended 2 funerals. How many other funerals took place across Canada during that time that they couldn't gain access to the Truehope products? How many others? We don't know. We don't know if a few of them said, well, they're a rogue company, I don't want to actually associate with them, and they were just fresh to working with us. We don't know how many took their lives. We don't know how many ended up back in the psych ward. We don't know. All we know is that we had 10% of of our...
Do you know what, when you're talking, because it's so extreme if you look at it, is that, I was just thinking about government, you could call it, when it starts to become completely corrupt, which in the end times of any empire, is they're a business of control. I think people don't realize the government's not for the people. Even the police officers are struggling with this, is they're not really for the people, because they let criminals do anything they want, and it's actually the victim that gets the brunt of it. Mm-hmm. So the idea is that the business of control. And then if you work for people who are supposed leaders or micromanagers in reality, in a business of control, you think, if they're your bosses, they're above you. It's almost like you have the superiority inferiority thing. Then you look at outside companies that say it's from the heart, right? Which is why I resonate so much with you. Is it's not a business. It's about sharing. And to me, sharing has to be about empowering others to find access to things that heal themselves. And hopefully that's free. Even though we're both have companies out there, we want to share as much free information. They don't want to share anything that way. They want to share information that leads you to believe that you should be in a state of fear, divide and conquer, so that they can control you. And to me, when you get into relationships where you're trying to understand, or you're going to court with them, or you're trying to mediate with them, that you're dealing with 2 different mindsets completely. So anything that we are saying that we feel is just logical, and of course, and we love this, we want to help people, to them, it's just in one ear, out the other, because they're waiting for you to shut up so they can tell you, you need to do this, you need to do that. So to me, it's like, it's insane, because you can't have a rational conversation. I feel that what we were being led to, and we can branch in any way we want. There's no holds barred here. I say that any health authority in any country just change the word health to disease, and then it's more accurate. Is that we were being prepared, kind of, if you want to say, with whatever people believe, for the last 5 years there.
Oh, yeah.
To watch what happens when people give up all their power to authority figures and just listen and believe that politics is an answer instead of they're the problem. They're dividing us. And then go after people. Instead of going after the head of the snake, we go after and chop up all this and fight with each other. That's the way that governments have always, and empires have always tried to take the power away from the masses, because there's only a few of them. And so I think it's not an expression. This is what's gone on. You read Sun Tzu, The Art of War. You read how to psychologically manipulate and degrade a society. You don't even need to fire a bullet. And so then the last 5 years showed that what society can do and how judgmental and everything people can be with no authority to do so, because they don't even understand what they're talking about. They're just trying to spew at you and be part of a herd. It's a herd mentality. Is that, holy smokes. Okay, there's the one that we witnessed. Last 5 years was like coming to a head. We've already been going through this for 20 years, your family and our family.
Yep.
But then seeing it, but then also, it's like when you go through it, then it doesn't traumatize you the same as it would another person, because they're corrupt. I figured that would happen. We were headed there. That kind of idea. And now we're coming out into another part where we see you're able to talk to everybody again. I always joke, 20 years ago when I learned all this, 25 years ago, I couldn't talk to anybody, including my own family, about what I learned, because they didn't want to hear it. It stresses people out to hear something that upsets their whole reality bubble. But now people want to hear about everything. I joke around, you can talk about Bigfoot, everybody, nobody cares. Everything, you can talk about anything. People, they know that something's wrong, even if they're not ready to talk yet, because they feel like they're getting attacked by the mob. It's that they know something's wrong. And that's how you know everything is falling apart.
Yeah, there's cracks in the paradigms.
And so sharing stories like this helps people see, you can get through it, but we need to be working towards something better. I keep cutting. I just wanted to reiterate that I feel you, man.
Well, I want to go just real quickly before jumping back into the whole, the history that's going to get us to where we are today, and the victory that came out of the court case, which is a beautiful thing. Talking about the last 5 years, and I don't want to be unempathetic, but I put out a lot of live streams during that time, and actually generated quite an alternative following in relation to lifestyle during that time, because I just come out of a commune. I'd lived in a commune for a year and a half, an off-grid commune, got to explore, got to observe, and it was really interesting because I had no skin in the game. Me and my family, we were just there. Yeah. We were there to help. We were there to be helped. It was a very synergistic relationship that we had, but I had no emotional attachment to it. So I was able to try to view it as objectively as possible. And it was really cool. Yeah. Well, that came to an end March 15th, 2020. And I had already started communicating the value of community. And so I had a lot of people that were following me and asking, my opinion on this or that, and how do you go living off grid? How do you get self-sustainable? How do you liberate yourself and detach from the system? But I don't want to be unempathetic. But when I look back at the last 5 years, aside from, some upsets in business, supply chain shortages and whatnot, the personal impact that COVID had on me and my family, is I had to wait in line once at Costco for 5 minutes. Or I had to endure literally a couple, not even a handful, of harassments for not wearing a mask.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. That was the total impact that it had on me. Because for the most part, like the way that my kids live and stuff, they would have had no idea COVID was even happening. Yeah. That it was a thing. Because it didn't impact them. Well, no, that's not entirely true. We went to go mountain biking one time, and we got turned away, even though we had bought the tickets and everything, and we were about to hit up the chairlift. And here I've got, my 6-year-old. He's excited to go for the first time. He's going to go up the chairlift with the mountain bike, and then I've got my 8-year-old beside him. And they turned us away and said, "You're not wearing a mask." Are you kidding me? We're outside. We're getting on a chairlift. We're not even getting within 6 feet of you. What are you talking about? No, you can't go on unless you have a mask. I can't go on a chairlift up the side of a mountain without a mask. So that's about the total impact that it had. And so I think there's something to be said about coming out of this system, becoming more self-reliant.
Yes, then especially if your whole family is, because they also rip people in with, if you're an elderly person that you're associated with or something sick and they're dying, you can't go see them in the hospital,
right? Unless
you have your shots or wear a mask and do both things. And I thought that's how you know it. Once you go down rabbit holes, that's how you know, because a mask that has the type of mask you were wearing has no protective elements against any type of toxin that would be that small of caliber. Not even close. It's like literally like a gnat, even not even a mosquito, a gnat through a chain link fence.
Right.
There's no protection. And if you don't keep changing them every couple hours, this is something for the future to consider. If you don't keep changing them every couple hours, because I was training these disciplines, right, in science and medicine, is that you start forming different organisms on the mass that then you're reabsorbing and breathing in. Yeah. So you're actually making yourself sicker, which then heightens your potential to spread bacteria and fungus and that. We're not talking about virus, spread those to other people. And then also, you have to fit those around. And even when doctors wear them, they're not to prevent, you're not supposed to operate with things like that if you have some type of toxin, virus, whatever they want to talk about, whatever people believe in, is that they don't prevent that. Right. You're not supposed to actually do operations when you're sick. It's to prevent drip onto your patient.
Yes.
And the spread of larger microbes, bacteria, and fungus. Right. It has no bearing. So then when they're doing that and making you wear it all around, including outside, not allowed to go in parks and everything, I think everybody's waking up to the fact that didn't make sense. Because if you want to, the old way of doing things prior to 2020 was totally opposite of this. You get called a conspiracy theorist now for talking about the same thing, is that the only real way to prevent, if there's some type of toxin or pathogen exposure, the only real way that you're going to be able to deal with that is through exposure to fresh air and decrease in the concentration load. That's just common sense. That's the way it's always been in medicine. That means opening up all windows, huge amounts of ventilation and filtration of the air.
Right, like the treatment of croup, right? Like that's still one of the most effective ways to help with croup, is get some fresh air.
Right, and you let the healthy people keep going outside and getting fresh air because that's what keeps you healthy, and sunlight and everything else. Yep. So everything they did back then was nothing to do with whatever exposure they thought you were having. It was everything to do with some type of social engineering program. You don't have to call it conspiracy, it just was. The military admitted that in Canada, that they were doing that, experiments for social engineering. So then why are they doing that? Is that everything we've been dealing with all these years kind of led us to see, yeah, we know why they're doing it. Because they are trying to control everything that you do in every certain way. Before they could do it and just felt everything's fine because you had sort of choice and there wasn't all this computer gadgets, everything's fine. As time went on and on and on, you start to realize it, it's in your face, and then social media and everything, people started spreading stuff. Ooh, this is weird. And then you think anybody that thinks outside this box, which the inside the box is you're actually not thinking. And then you think, if I get into this, sorry, I segued again. I want to get back in your story. But one thing I want to talk about here, is I think ties into your story and our story, is that people think, why did all these people that are supposed to be so smart and intellectuals, why do they keep falling? Why do they keep supporting it? Why don't they believe? If they don't believe government do that, then I shouldn't believe it. Why? And because the education system is completely tied to everything. The education system, we did an episode on this, on education. Education derives from the root educere or educere in Latin, which means to draw out, draw forth. It doesn't mean to put facts in. Right. So education today is not actually education, it's indoctrination, because you're just filling people full of facts. And then someone gets really smart at memorizing and utilizing the facts that are inside the box that they've created. Yeah. And so, anything that's outside that box, which our companies and our thinking styles represent, so do all the ancient ways of thinking, by the way. And the deeper parts of the religious tradition and science, they go against the box. The box is more like a populist way of thinking in science, religion, everything else. The superficial waves. We're talking about deeper ocean concepts and ideas, and living is a threat. And so before it was you couldn't talk about it. Now we can talk about it, and we're talking about it. No holds barred. And sorry, I just wanted to preface with that because I think we're in super exciting times. And they think, why would you share this kind of thing? It could put you in a target. But no, I feel like we just need to help people to light them up. Everybody that's going through anything to see that, no, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're going back to ancient ways. And It's all coming back, and you can't stop it.
Yeah, and we can't ever fear having a target on our back, because the reality of the situation is in relation to the world that we exist is that when a man sets out to do something good and to do so in a profound way to bless humanity, yeah.
So keep it. You're at 2003. I cut him off again. Sorry.
So the point, you will get pummeled, and you better be prepared for the pummeling. And oftentimes it's not the strength that'll carry you through; it's the persistence,
yes,
and the tenacity.
Mosquito.
Right, exactly. You just keep on going. Stay the course.
Keep on keeping on.
And you will get beat down, and you'll question your existence sometimes. But you just get up and you keep on moving. You keep the vision, and you just move forward. And it's amazing. I mean, you can overcome anything. You will be carried through it, but you will be tried, and you will be beat down, and you will become stronger because of it. And so we've been through these journeys, and so I'll continue on so that we can get to closer to where we are today, because I know that you've gone through some really cool scenarios.
Yeah, you go first.
So the court victory happens, and my dad actually attempted to hold the government to account, and then he sued the Health Canada for basically killing Canadians.
Yeah.
He sued them.
Yeah.
And so this was really a battle on behalf of Canadian populace.
Yes.
And after a number of years, it was a good 4 or 5 years, we would lose that. We'd be told that we have no standing, which is interesting because we had legal standing. It harmed us. It harmed the company. It harmed Canadians with what Health Canada's actions did, and Health Canada knew it. And so we had legal standing, and yet they shut us down, and then they awarded Health Canada costs. So now, not only did we lose in going against them, trying to hold them to account, but then we had to pay a portion of their legal fees. So insult to injury, another $150,000, right? So absolutely corrupt. So now we're 10 years of dealing with Health Canada, and we think that we're out of the forest on it. Everything's good, right? We're going to continue on business as normal. At this point in time, we now have NPN numbers, right? So they've licensed our products. We're supplying them to people across Canada through health food stores legally, right? Same formula, same product, same research, same studies that caused them to try to come in and shut it down and kill Canadians in the first place. So then I guess to fast forward is they don't let things go so easy like you were alluding to earlier on. And we have this issue where, at this point in time, I've got a 4-year-old son and a 1.5-year-old son. And many people will recognize this. Many people will still recognize when I say my son is Ezekiel, they'll be like, wait a minute, that's you?
It's a big story. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they exploited it. It was phenomenal, and not just Canada wide. It was international.
Yeah, I know.
It was just phenomenal. The agenda that they were driving, and it's interesting because we hired Sean Buckley as a lawyer. We had to, and I'll get into the details as to how we got there. But he just shook his head and said, if the Canadian government came and said, this is what we're looking to do for an agenda, who should we not target? He says, you guys would be on the top 5 list because of the fact that, I've seen your tactics. I know how your dad operates, right? He goes almost kamikaze, right? To rewind, just digress for a brief moment. The court case in 2005 with Health Canada wasn't supposed to happen. They were going to drop the charges. And when my dad found out about it, he actually got all of us boys to sit around a conference room table with the phone in the center there. And he starts phoning these Health Canada agents personally and saying, hey, we understand you're about to drop the charges. And I just want to say how good of news that is, because now I'm going to sue you personally and we're going to see you in court right away.
This is their family tradition.
So this is a pinnacle moment, right? Now he's doing this unbeknownst to David Hardy, his business partner, because David would have lost it. He's like, what? No, have the charges dropped, right? This is good news. No, it wasn't good news.
No.
We'd already racked up a bill. My dad wanted his day in court. And so he then taunted them. And sure enough, they kept the charges going. And sure enough, we end up with a victory. And not just a victory, it also helped set precedent in Canada for the whole natural health community.
Yes.
And so it was a really beautiful thing. And my dad was inspired to move forward with it. And so he wasn't going to let it go. So that's why he started taunting them, saying, I'm going to see you in court one way or the other. So they decided to roll the dice. So Now, Sean Buckley has experience with that. He's saying, I'm not sure why they're targeting you with this. This just doesn't make sense. Like, you guys of all people, because I know your guys' tactics. So what happened was in 2012, my son ended up sick with the croup and it went away. And then over the next week, he resumed activities. At this point in time, like we're homeschoolers, but there were some really good resources. This preschool parent preschool where my 4-year-old son would go there. My wife would take the 1.5-year-old as well. They'd play. And during that time, there was some really great resources where the mothers would be empowered with this information on how to become better parents. And my wife just loved the whole concept. So she was doing that. So he goes back to that and with her and then church is resumed, right? But he's got this up and down. And we're like, this is interesting. It almost looks like he's fighting off the flu, but he's not like into the flu. Well, he ends up in crisis one night. And it wasn't like this degradation, and the media attempted to make it look like this.
It's quick.
It was, well, he actually went symptom free for the better part of probably 5 hours ish. And he went down for a nap. And at this point in time, I'm now left alone with him because my wife's like reassured that he's going to be up and running the next day. So she went to this activity that she wasn't going to go to, but she went to this church activity that night. And so I'm hanging out with him, and he wakes up from his nap and there's something curious happening, and his breathing patterns changing, but yet he seems tired still. I put him back down for the nap, but I'm curious about this, but I'm like, nothing like the croup at, a week and a half before. So, she comes home from her activity and, I fill her in on what's going on, and he goes into crisis rapidly. Before we had the opportunity to really assess as to what's going on, should we take him to the doctor? He stops breathing and, 911 calls happen and stuff like that. Well, he starts breathing again. We drove him to the hospital because we're out in the middle of nowhere, right? Kind of like where we are now, right?
Yeah.
Ambulance probably isn't going to find our place so easy, right? So we start driving to the hospital, and then he stops breathing again. Well, long story short, he ends up on life support for 5 days in Alberta Children's Hospital. And then they pull him off life support, and he passes away. We're curious as parents, wondering what happened. Now, at this point in time, we've been targeted already.
Yep.
RCMP comes in, as well as Calgary City Police, and all of a sudden the emergency room, or the pediatric intensive care unit there, has 6 police officers, armed officers there, a day after we got in there with Ezekiel. And I'm thinking, I'm leaving in cuffs, and I'm not sure why, but they're coming after me. Now, I'd already been involved in some other stuff personally in relation to sovereignty movements and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I'd won a court case actually surrounding license and registration, right, and not having them. I won a court case on that. So I was flagged as an individual. Actually, they call it a sovereign citizen, which is oxymoronic. Yeah. You can't be sovereign and a citizen at the same time. So anyways,
property taxes tell you that, income tax.
Right. So what happens is we get interviewed by the RCMP after they figured out whose jurisdiction it was. RCMP takes over, Calgary City Police walk away, and we ended up with a good detective. But, we're there till 4 a.m. being interviewed after not having slept for like 48 hours because of the whole debacle of taking my son in and then us getting there, and you're not sleeping. Your son's on his deathbed and you're wondering what happened. So that takes place. We're being targeted, but then we think it's all over. And it was all over, actually. If you follow the paper trail, it was over because that detective said, nothing's wrong here, no need for charges.
Yeah.
Right? So we order the autopsy report because we're wondering, how did our son die? Like, none of this is making sense. And they're already starting to establish this narrative around bacterial meningitis, but they haven't qualified it through a single test. And that's easy to...
Yes, it is easy.
Right? So they've got no verification, but they're saying it. And they're using it, and they're repeating it.
That's how you know you're in trouble. When they're about to pounce.
Right.
Because you can see them doing it.
Yeah, they're generating a narrative without any evidence to support the narrative.
Yeah.
So we're wondering, how did he pass? So we order the autopsy report. This happens in March, mid-March of 2012. By the end of November 2012, we finally get an autopsy report, and I get a phone call from the medical examiner's office, not from the medical examiner himself, but one of the assistants. And he says, hey, your autopsy report is on its way, right? And, just want to let you know that it was vaccine preventable, his death. I said
that to you.
I said, oh, interesting. I said, okay. I said, what vaccine would have prevented his death? Right? Just want to dig in a little bit. He says, oh, actually, I don't know that. I'd have to talk to the medical examiner, but I just, want to relay that information. I'm thinking that's odd. Thank you, appreciate it. Like maybe you're genuinely trying to help me here, but probably not. And so I get the autopsy report, and sure enough, the first paragraph that basically categorizes everything, like it's the overview, right? Before getting into all the fine details. Yeah. Starts off with, 18-month-old, previously healthy, non-immunized. Okay, so that's your first thing right there. But then even within that paragraph, it mentions vaccines twice and how they had to use non-clinical research methodologies to determine the cause of death. So that when I read that, I thought, well, that's interesting. Like that's a lot of jargon.
We'll figure out how to get what we want.
Well, it rose a flag right off the bat. I'm like, non-clinical research methodologies to determine that it was Haemophilus influenza and that the Hib vaccine, Haemophilus influenza B vaccine, would have prevented it. Okay, well, that's interesting. Well, I read it. Now, this is, late November, early December of 2012. And when I read it, I'm looking at it and saying, I've never read an autopsy report before. But in reading this, I can't help but think that with this information that they're stretching, they're trying to get as much vaccine info into the autopsy report as possible, but yet they're not creating a solid connection. I can't help but think that they're going to charge us and it's going to be a vaccine trial.
The part that hits me that I know, the psychological manipulation, everything is, this is intense trauma you're going through right now. Just lost your son, intense trauma, and then they're hitting you basically at the same time when you're discombobulated,
yes.
Which is exactly what the tactic would be.
And the timing's perfect, by the way. Okay, so they could have charged us way earlier, but it takes time to falsify autopsy reports. I'm just going to say that, right? And this is not the first time I've stated that. I've stated it probably about 100 times on probably 100 different interviews and podcasts across the world that autopsy report was falsified. And we were actually hoping at some point in time they would try to sue us for me making that statement. Exactly. Yeah. But they've never taken the bait. Why? Because they know that it'll lead them into some...
Like the Epstein files.
Sure, exactly, right?
It's funny, but everybody's waking up to the fact that criminals, these big-time criminals, they never get exposed, but they go after you for false things to keep you off track. And I feel like they did that to you. It was horrific to watch, by the way, as a friend, because I've always been friends with you guys. It's just... That was so hard to watch. I'm so glad that you came to Salt Spring with Colette. I just can't imagine going through the thing in itself and then them trying to come after you. Like, it's animalistic type of behavior that they participate in over and over and over again.
I'd go beyond animalistic, because animalistic oftentimes is run by instincts. This was actually malicious, pure malicious. Like it's taking it a step further where they had an intent to try to destroy. And we saw that replete throughout the whole of it. Many of the court proceedings were scheduled on the anniversary dates of Ezekiel's passing, or 3 years in a row on my birthday. I don't care. I don't even celebrate my birthday, so what do I care? But you could see the tactics, or they rendered a decision on the due date, and they knew when the due date was, because at this point in time we'd been wrongfully convicted at one point, and then we had to undo all that. But they even, and so you're checking with a parole officer, and so they know when the due date is of Colette with my last child, my daughter. And they literally rendered a decision that took 8 months. They rendered it on the due date of my daughter, and I'm supposed to go back to jail at that point in time. And I said, I'm not going back to jail. I'll get to that in a bit. But so what ends up happening is they end up eventually charging us. Now, I thought I was being paranoid at first, or after a few weeks, where I'm like, oh, good. No, they're not charging us. This is December 2012. I'm on edge during that time, and December goes by. And then January goes by. I'm like, oh, okay, good. It's just being paranoid, right? That gut feeling and the impression that they're going to charge us over a vaccine thing. Okay, good. Well, February 12th rolls around, and RCMP phones, and they want to meet. And actually, I think they phoned me first, probably about February 9th, and they wouldn't get a hold of me till February 12th, because I'm like, I want nothing to do with you. I remember you guys. I remember you keeping us up till 4 a.m. while my son's on his deathbed and we're being told that he can go into cardiac arrest at any given time. And you're keeping us up till 4 a.m. Want nothing to do with you guys, right? And so anyways, they got a hold of me and they said, the Crown has some recommendations. I said, oh, okay, well, can you tell me those over the phone? And they're like, no, come in tomorrow. I said, okay. Well, at this point in time, we'd had little Ephraim about 8 months before. So he's still young. He comes in with Colette. We sit down in this interrogation room and the cop is just gloating because he's been told that I'm this sovereign individual and there's no way he's going to be able to charge me. Not realizing, no, I'm a pretty decent guy. I'm a cooperative. So I walk in there and he's gloating and he says, you've been charged with, and he serves me with the papers, failing to provide necessaries of life. And I'm like, oh, I've never really looked into that one, but I have a criminal code. I've read it, right, from my past experiences. I'm like, if I recall properly, that's not a light one. So sure enough, I get home and I look it up and up to 5 years in jail. I'm thinking, oh boy, this is bad. This is bad. Colette's crying on the couch. If you want to even call it a couch, I'm sitting at the table as he's, serving us the papers. We're like, what does this even mean? What does this mean for our family? What does this mean for our kids? Right at this point in time, we now have a 5-year-old and we have one who's not even a year old. And so anyways, sure enough, they charged us at that time, but they did it methodically. They had to wait a certain period of time because by the time that we'd get our disclosure and realize there's deficiencies in the disclosure, time lapses had already occurred because they only had to keep certain files for 13 months. And by the time we got our disclosure, it had been 14 months, right? So it was a perfect thing that they could scrap all of the interactions between the police officers over the radio that's being documented. All of that was gone, scrubbed. So we had no longer access to understanding the setup that took place to us going through this whole debacle. But then what would end up happening is we would discover through the whole process that one, it was a vaccine trial. Now, Sean Buckley, we hired him, right?
Yeah.
And we did so initially because we knew that his stance on natural health and freedoms, because a lot of, we went and sat down with certain lawyers and one of them even grilled me and said, what if they get you on stand and they ask you, if there was a polio outbreak, would you get your children vaccinated? He says, you have to be prepared for that. And I said, okay. I said, well, the simple answer is no, right? Based on what I know, it's an absolute no. And he says, well, and you could tell the disdain that he had. And I'm like, we're not getting that guy as a lawyer. He's not going to represent us. He's going to represent his ideologies, right? Yeah. So what ended up taking place, we got Sean Buckley, and I brought that up with Sean. I said, hey, look, this is going to be a vaccine trial. He says, it can't be. There's no precedent in Canada. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'll leave it at that. But I'm like, well, how do you get a precedent in Canada?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out we were going to be the precedent.
Yep.
So now you fast forward, this is end of 2013. We get into the preliminary hearing in 2014, and the Crown prosecutor, ironically, he would become a judge, and he's the judge that just ruled on the whole Coots, the Coots 4.
Yep.
Well, the two of them that were just sentenced, he's the judge that ran that case, right? So it's kind of interesting that they have certain players to do these,
same
right?
as the media. They pick certain media officials that cover all the stories.
Exactly. Yeah.
CBC did that.
So he, at this point in time, is still a Crown prosecutor, David Lebruns, and he keeps on, in the preliminary hearing, drawing all this vaccine information out of every doctor. And every doctor is all of a sudden a vaccine expert. Now, they're not trained in that at all.
Nope.
But yet they're all
mostly in the veterinary industry, by the way. The vaccine stuff is mostly veterinary.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have
a lot of it's veterinary.
You have these GPs, you have these pediatric intensivists. They're all just spewing this stuff as if they've been coached, and we know they were coached. And so finally, Sean Buckley stands up and says, I wasn't aware that vaccines were going to be a topic during this trial. Well, Crown Prosecutor David Lebruns pipes back and says, actually, it's going to be a big part of this trial. So then they go and they discuss it over lunch. And Sean Buckley comes back and says what they're looking to do is set a precedent with this case that if you as a parent choose not to vaccinate your children and any harm, doesn't even have to be death, but any harm befalls them that they deem to be vaccine preventable, you are criminally liable. Boom, big deal, right? Because up to that point, we're being protected. I mean, Public Health Agency of Canada came out and made this statement back in the 90s saying, we can't mandate vaccines because our rights are protected, or the Canadians' rights are protected through the Constitution, right? So in that sense, we actually had a stronger Constitution than the US did in relation to those types of matters of public health. And so now they're looking at not mandating it that way, but mandating it through fear, compulsory, that now
you're the public judging, because that's what they do.
Right, exactly. Right. So
hiss.
And it worked.
Yeah.
It worked. So now we fast forward to 2016 where it blows up in the international media. And I've got people reaching out to me saying, hey, I haven't vaccinated my children. What would you recommend that I do? Yeah. Right? Because I don't want to end up in the situation you are. Yeah. And my advice was always the same. Hold to your guns. Yeah. Stick to them. Do not compromise, right? Don't allow our situation to influence you, right? This is, right? Like, we're going to see how this all works out in the end, but that's the agenda is, let's crucify these parents, right? On the altar of vaccines, really.
So you don't know this about me that I know of, but so when we have 3 kids, and way back in the day when, because I had my background in medicine and science, and I was looking at vaccines as an issue already. You study virology and immunology and microbiology, and you think viruses are always a weird thing. And anyway, you get into it, and then you look how modern medicine, which is falling right now, this is what's happening, so you can talk about it, is how they basically gained a foothold. One of the big ones was with vaccination. And this is what's coming big right now, again, to try, because all the patents are being lost in a lot of the other medications. So there's no money in these things. So put all the money in this vaccines or the mRNA tech. Anyway, you look at it, and you know this, but you look at the graphs. So they took all the credit for the elimination of all these different conditions, that you think of. Diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, measles, mumps, all that kind of thing. Smallpox. But then you look at the graphs that show from early 1900s, as these conditions were already going down. Like, for instance, if the graph looks like this, it's up here, say. So here's the bottom. And it's starting to fall already quite a bit. And then it's starting to rapidly drop, that's what typically happens in a lot of conditions. Then when it's down here, right near the line, and it's moving across and almost out, that's when vaccines, right, or after it's completely gone, then they're taking credit. But really what was happening was there was changes in hygiene and nutrition and all these different advancements in basically the terrain theory, how to keep yourself healthy and how to clean up your environment around you. Simply, no poop on the street, stuff like that. Anyway, this was all happening rapidly, and it was changing the whole world, but then they took credit for that. So when you say that I don't want our kids to vaccinate, don't need to, because we take care of ourselves in a different way, especially if you're in the health industry, or we practice ancient methods, simple methods to stay healthy and clean, is that we choose not to do that. We're not saying that anybody else has to follow suit with us or anything, nothing. This is the whole thing about what happened in the last 5 years. If you make a choice because you actually know quite a bit about this, and in the ancient ways, the new, we're not deficient in pharmaceuticals. We've talked about, we're not deficient in pharmaceuticals. We're deficient in nourishment, which you talk a lot about with Empower Plus, things like that. And that affects us mentally, physically, everything else. But then when someone finds out, I don't want to do that, they so heavily, and they're so indoctrinated in believing that vaccines actually did get rid of those conditions.
Yep.
And the logic holds and everything. But when you actually put it to the test, which is making a lot of people really mad, frustrated, because there's a lot of money involved, especially, and they've been indoctrinating this thinking. What's happening in the States? I'm not politically motivated at all. I think politics is all bunk. Mm-hmm. But down the States with Robert Kennedy, what he's establishing right now in a slow process is, number one, get rid of the mercury out of all the vaccines. People didn't know that accumulates in your body. It's a neurotoxin, all this, all the stuff that it causes. That's why the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland and dentists suffering from depression, suicidal thoughts was, off mercury. Anyway, we get there. Then he's moving towards, for the first time ever, vaccines will now have to undergo proper trials. What does that mean? That you're actually going against a true placebo, not a vaccinated group.
Hasn't happened once yet.
It's never happened. And people don't realize this. It's never happened. So what he's saying is that has to happen now. The part that's making people mad, he's going to destroy the next pandemic, is going to kill everyone. No, that's not what's happening. He's saying, show me the safety and efficacy data, because you just slammed that down our throat for the last 5 years. It's safe and effective. There's never been safety and efficacy data done on traditional vaccines the way that we think at all. So if you say you have to do it, they're scared out of their wits because they know they're not going to pass safety.
Yeah.
They're not going to pass efficacy. Then when you start to correlate all of the data, which is significant between unvaccinated versus vaccinated kids, followed over 20 to 30 year spans, which they've done those research. They hold them because they don't want to release it because they think it'll cause vaccine hesitancy. No, they don't. They think it'll cause massive lawsuits because when you see it, the increases in diseases across the board with autoimmunity, cancers, asthma, skin conditions, all these things, digestive disorder, all that stuff. We're not talking little changes. We're talking like hundreds to thousands of % difference in neurological deficits, everything, all the stuff that you see is happening right now. And he gives a primary figure he gives that I love. He said that in the day of JFK, his uncle and his dad, RFK Sr., is when they were in power in the States, that they had 11% of people had chronic illness. That was documented, 11%. Today, right now, it's 76.4% of Americans having a chronic disease state. Why is that? Then he correlates it with when did that big uptick happen? It happened in the late 80s when they started to increase the vax schedule. So whatever you think about vaccines, if you just do science and correlate, there's not much else that you can see but what happened in a major way. And you can say it's not causal, it's condition, or it's coincidence. No, it's not. It's right in our faces. And you can see the data. Why would you take something that they said got rid of something if afterwards you saw the graphs they referred to, it was already gone? Why would you wouldn't say that was the thing that got rid of it? And then why would you need to take it? And again, we're not deficient in pharmaceuticals, but the people that make money off those things are deficient if you don't buy into that paradigm.
Oh, absolutely.
But this is falling apart right now. So you got caught in this whole, I think, again, when you said earlier, why do they go after you? They go after you if something's effective. Why do they also go after you? If you're saying something that's happening that's scaring the crap out of them. Already people are challenging not just the whole COVID shenanigans. They're challenging the entire vaccine paradigm. And and that was already happening before COVID. It's been happening for a long time because people are doing the research and looking at, and RFK was a big part of it when he was fulfilling those lawsuits for those people that brought forth all that evidence to show all the harm that was being done. He didn't even know anything about it. He got into it out of his heart. It became a heart thing for him, just like Sean Buckley. It's a heart thing for him. He's not making tons of money, believe me, right? Is that then you're looking at something and saying, okay, I see the evidence. If you see the evidence, that's more scientific. If you look at evidence and ignore it and convince the populace that anybody that's looking at this evidence is a conspiracy theorist and everything like that, then we're talking about scientism. So right now we're looking at, most of what we look at as, say, religion and science are isms.
Exactly.
They're not the actual truth of any science, as a matter of fact, and the religions could all be grouped together under a wanting and a desire to understand and awareness, right? A scientia, desire to know. And so the underlying principle, if you desire to know, you will then collaborate with everyone to come to a higher truth, right? Like synthesism in the Socratic dialogues. What's happened now is you got scientism and religious isms, or whatever you want to go, is that they're all the superficial waves. We think that's what they are. Because we don't understand their depths. And at their depths, they all intertwine. They're propelled. Just a desire for knowledge and to live a good life and to understand deep principles of reality. In this, we're fighting over all the waves and the people that don't actually do the work or live. And we all know that. You see people that are in a religion or in science, you think they should think, why don't they think this way? They're part of that. Yeah, because they don't actually live it.
No.
It's just a conceptual thing they fling around in their head. And they were going after you because you were representing a strong case and a strong challenge to a paradigm that they are already struggling with. Now they're trying to set a precedent. This is my
absolutely view. No, absolutely. You know, it's amazing what lengths people will go to uphold their paradigms that are founded upon faulty dogmas, right?
crazy.
It is crazy. And it's religious in nature in that sense. Like when I talk about religion, I look at the blinders on religion.
More like a cult-like behavior.
Exactly. And you see that with those that are saying, oh, you're a science denier. Oh, am I a science denier or am I a denier of your unfounded dogmas?
Totally.
Right? I'm reading the science. Yes, I'm looking at it. Are you? Or are you just adopting the opinion of someone else as they indoctrinate you with something and tell you this is what you should believe?
Totally.
Right? That's not science.
Nope.
And so that's what we would come up against, because we now know that we're in a vaccine trial. We know that they're looking to set a precedent that's going to hold parents criminally liable in Canada if they don't vaccinate their children. And so we do what we think we should do, and we go and hire two experts, Dr. Tony Bark and Dr. Tatiana Obekanich. And they generate some reports, some expert reports in preparation for the 2016 trial. And the reports are scathing. Going right from the VAERS database, right? The vaccine adverse,
reports,
yep. Right, that's government documentation, which is highly underreported, by the way, but there's still enough in there.
They used that in COVID and then tried to deny everything. It's the only kind of mechanism we have to judge if something's causing harm out there.
Right.
And it's the government process, and they tried to make it look like it's nothing, and it's severely underreported, like you said.
Yeah, and so now they have all of this reporting on the HIB, the HIB vaccine, Haemophilus influenza type B vaccine, which shows that, one, people are dying from it. So it's like, wait a minute, okay, you want me to get my child this, saying that it could have potentially prevented his death, but yet it could have caused his death. That's interesting, and you're going to hold me criminally liable. So first of all, it's not safe. That was the first thing that was established. And then the second thing is that there's all these reports of children getting that vaccine and then ending up with Haemophilus influenza, and some of them even dying from Haemophilus influenza. So there goes the effectiveness. So neither safe, neither effective. So we have expert reports coming from authenticated government reporting on this. As soon as it's put forward to the Crown, that part of the trial disappears.
So you said something too that's interesting. If, as you're following all this talk, because we're talking about vaccines, which obviously a really hot topic and highly debatable, is if you look back to the 60s and 70s reporting on vaccines like swine flu and things like that, and the harm that was caused and when they would stop them, and then realize what just happened in the last 5 years, is if that was covered before, even a few deaths before were covered in the news, but when the news media was captured, we're talking about horrific amounts of death and destruction, disease that are caused in the last 5 years that they won't even talk about at all. That's how you know they're captured. But before, they had like 60 Minutes and all those different things talked about it.
Right.
And they challenged the people really hard. Even Fauci and those guys were anyway, now they don't do any of that. They promote.
Not at all.
So there's a promotion of criminals and criminality.
Yep.
And that's how you know we're in the stage of fall, which is exciting to me because it's kind of exciting. I like the idea of that, but it means that it's the last stages. The problem is it's painful. So keep going. Anyways, you experienced the pain. That's insane.
So we're getting prepped for trial proper 2016. So it's now about almost 4 years after the death of Ezekiel, right? So we're starting off like the first week of March.
The whole thing again.
And once again, that trial is over the duration of his passing, right? Is what we're scheduled for. Interesting. So we're thinking, okay, you're dropping the vaccine portion of the trial. Well, what are you moving forward with then? Because this is going to look really bad, because what had already come out in 2014 during the preliminary hearing is that our son gets into an ambulance that Alberta Health Services had just taken over a year before. And they proactively went into the ambulances in the south zone of Alberta, and they removed certain equipment from those ambulances. The paramedics looked at it and said, we need that equipment.
Yes.
And the first toddler that gets into our ambulance that needs an airway is dead.
Yep.
That goes on for a year. And
that should have been the end of it immediately when they found that.
Absolutely.
So we're backed off.
Yeah, so we're thinking this is about to come out. It already came out in incredible clarity as the paramedic is basically breaking down on the stand and in tears over the fact that he couldn't save my son because his request to Alberta Health Services had gone ignored for over a year. And then get this, my son Ezekiel passes. He goes for 8.5 minutes without any oxygen. This comes out in 2014. And he ends up passing because his brain is absolutely destroyed by the time that they get him into the Alberta Children's Hospital. And not just from that event. There's a few events that would stack up, and we'd learn that over time. The very next week, all of those ambulances were outfitted with that proper equipment from Alberta Health Services. So they were not
That's
just...
a mission of guilt right there.
Well, absolutely. So they weren't just targeting us based on who we were and based on, oh, they didn't vaccinate, we can go for... They were also involved in a cover-up. And they had to come up with an alternative mode of death, saying, well, bacterial meningitis, it doesn't matter if he got an airway or not, because he had so much intracranial pressure that it compressed the brainstem, shutting down his ability to breathe and his heart to beat. And so that's what happened. Well, that would come with a set of symptoms that's undeniable, because that kind of intracranial pressure is going to come with that's going to be a headache from hell, like the worst of headaches. Yes. He didn't have that. He showed no signs of discomfort. He was playful a couple hours before. Nothing lined up. Reality didn't line up with the narrative that they had generated, that they had to use a non-clinical research methodology to establish, which that phrase simply meant PCR test, which was not approved.
Don't get me started on that.
It literally, that's what it meant. It was a PCR test, which was not approved for diagnostics in cerebrospinal fluid in Alberta.
PCR is not really a test, by the way. It's a mode of, it's a operational, what do you call it? Device, so to speak, to concentrate, to magnify a piece. We use it in genetics. So the idea is that people got bedazzled by the PCR tests, and even the inventor, Dr. Kerry Mullis, said that you should never use it for diagnostics because it'll find false positives everywhere, especially if you run too many cycles, which they obviously did, way over 25 to 45, whatever.
You will find what you're
everything
looking for.
You want.
If you're looking for something,
it's like Indra's net in the Indian tradition, where everything's mirrored in everything. You'll find it. So sorry, I digress, because it's a horrible story. If you think, I keep on thinking the fact that you actually lost your child. Mm-hmm. Psychopaths, by definition, don't feel empathy. That's the whole psychopathic tendency is a lack of empathy. Mm-hmm. And if you start working with these certain types of people that are hired in even different types of positions in companies or government organizations, you see that there's psychopathic tendencies. Mm-hmm. And that's why they're hired in these positions. They'll just follow and do what they're told. And it's almost like want to gloat and smile. I saw this in a social worker when I was in the court cases going through ours, that the social worker was out in the hall, and there's this mother, she was so distraught and she's going to lose her child. And I watched what had happened and what she had done, and she hadn't done anything. And the woman looked at me in the hallway, the social worker, like she was just happy that this lady's going to lose her child. She's just devastated. And I just looked at her, I glared, like, don't look at me like that. You're a psychopath. Like, they're literally, I think that we're engaged in this process where the psychopaths now are coming to the surface. You're seeing them. And people that call people gaslighters are typically the gaslighter.
Yes.
We're trained to use words.
Narcissists will
narcissists
tell
are
everyone,
that say you're a narcissist. You're a,
that's how I learned about narcissism, right? Was actually having two narcissists living on my property. I had no idea. And I had these two people always pointing the fingers at everyone saying they're narcissists. So I went and looked into it, and I'm like, you guys are narcissists.
It's crazy. And even anything to do, don't get me started too on toxic masculinity, all this stuff. Being a strong person and precise and confident is toxic masculinity. No, it's not. It's actually what keeps society together. The female and masculine principles operating on their positive poles is about inclusivity, precision. And if you look to the ancient metaphors for that, there was no about pushing the male aside and anything to do with strength and everything. That just creates a society that's easy to control. Sorry, I'm gonna
that's okay. And to follow that digression, I want to go down this a little bit further. Is you mentioned the psychopaths are rising, which is oftentimes associated with narcissistic personality disorder.
Yes, yeah.
I believe it's actually a symptom, and I have some stuff to qualify that theory where I've seen it turn around.
Yeah. And so that's great. You can turn it around.
Yes. But it's based on internal circumstances, right? But we'll get into that in a bit. Yeah. But yeah, so this is what we're dealing with, is people that are completely heartless, right? Completely heartless, and they are just running us through the meat grinder, really. Yeah. And so now I'm thinking, why are you guys proceeding with this trial? It's going to look really bad. The news is going to expose all of this as it comes to the forefront, that you had an improperly equipped ambulance. You were aware of the improperly equipped ambulance. It caused the death of my son. That's criminal negligence resulting in death. That's up to 25 years in jail. Yeah. Somebody is going to be hung out to dry.
Somebody's going to pay.
Well, would you ever hear that from the media? No. So what happened is, I'm thinking, you guys are crazy, because the media is going to report on this. The media refused to report on it. And when it came out in the first trial, 2016, that basically the autopsy report was falsified, that there was no scientific evidence to support it. And this is coming from the former chief medical examiner of Alberta, comes and looks at the case, looks at the slides, looks at everything that's still available and says, you can't qualify bacterial meningitis. There's no evidence to support that. Does the media report on it? No. That was the one day that the media all left so that they could say, oh, we didn't hear it, so we didn't have to report it. Because they knew what they were going to hear. So they were taking, this is where it got really interesting. You saw the evidence over the month and a half trial that the media was actually taking their cues from the Crown. The Crown was telling them what to report on. They'd all gather around the Crown after.
Just like COVID. And everybody all across the world was synchronizing because they're owned by the same media outlets.
Exactly.
Like, how would they do that? How would they do that? No, because they're all organized together through the same media ownership. They're captured. Yeah. And then the government's captured through it. So you just saw, before it was happening, COVID, what everybody saw, which you're starting to figure out, how could you have the exact same catchphrases across the entire spectrum?
Because they're being told what to say. Now, we had one reporter who...
So it's not news.
Who knew us. I mean, he wasn't close to us, but he knew us because he actually lived... But when we formerly lived in this small town, he lived literally across the road from us. And they removed him off the case because he was reporting objectively. He wasn't just sympathetic. No, he was.
No, but I mean, he would be empathetic. He empathized with you in a true way that he saw. Look what they're doing. Oh my God! This
right, but even empathy aside, he was literally just reporting what was taking place in the courtroom, whereas all the other media wasn't reporting that.
Spinning it.
Yes.
That's what I was saying about old news was
so they had
talking.
Yeah, so they removed him off the case and they came and saw us after when they reinstated him on the case towards the end. And he explained, he says, hey, by the way, sorry, I was, not reporting anymore, guys. They removed me off the case because of, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's interesting,
yeah.
Right? And so then we knew that we were like, this is uphill battle. This has nothing to do with the truth. The media is not reporting on the fact that there is an incredible double standard. You just charged us for failing to provide necessities of life, saying that you ignored the symptoms of bacterial meningitis, which my son didn't have. And by doing so, you failed to provide necessities of life. That's up to 5 years in jail. But yet on the other side, there is a crystal clear cut case of criminal negligence resulting in death, which is 25 years in jail. And yet nobody's reporting on it. They're shoving under the rug. It comes out in great clarity over the stand, yet the world doesn't know about it. And we're made out to look like these crazies who were feeding our son through an eyedropper. That was some of the narrative. It's like, how do you feed somebody through? I've never tried it yet, still to date. But I don't know if you could actually ever get an eyedropper. Can you?
I think people just need to meet people before they start judging like they do. And then they'd see that the narrative is spun so heavily. It's disgusting. It's like the bigger the lie, the easier it is to believe, right? Like you say with
it was so tabloid style and people want to believe that. I mean, there's a reason why tabloid type media still, because it's so entertaining. Yeah. Well, in this instance, literally all of the major news corps became tabloid style media. Yeah. Right. And so we became basically the most hated couple in Canada. Death threats were flowing. RCMP was ignoring them, saying that they're not legit. I'm like, we just supplied you with 24 death threats, like legitimate death threats, plus like hundreds of hate mail that occurred because of CBC's spin on this. And they're like, nope, not there. And so we're like, okay, I guess we're being hung out to dry here, and we're not protected under the law. So what would come out of 2016 is the judge would go so far as to misinstruct the jury so as to ensure a conviction. He went against case law because the jury they'd seen it all. Yeah. And they'd seen the games. And so the jury comes out after a day of deliberating, after they've been charged to find us not guilty or guilty. Yeah. And they come out after a day, and 6 out of the 12 are crying. Danielle Smith on, I believe, his QR 770 radio show, Alberta, reports 30 minutes before the verdict is out that we've been found guilty. So
yeah, that's the thing that people don't want to believe either, that they actually have fixed a case that basically force a hand. Like it just seems like a bad movie. No, it doesn't happen in reality. That reality is more intense than fiction. What's the word? Reality is more than fiction. How's the
Stranger
saying
than
go?
fiction. Yeah, fact is stranger than fiction.
Yeah, fact is stranger than fiction. Not stranger though, more horrific sometimes.
Yeah. Well, so this is like a movie literally playing out where I'm just looking at it saying, is this actually happening? Because I found out about that right after the jury came in, 6 of them crying and hesitantly saying guilty, right? Like they didn't want to, but they were actually forced into a corner by the judge. And then an appeal would have commenced, which was a very easy appeal, by the way, the amount of appealable points during that case. But what ended up happening is this couple was driving into Lethbridge that knows my dad, and they heard it over the radio that we were guilty. So like, oh, we got to go and support the family there. You know, they're probably just devastated at the courtroom. They show up to the courthouse, and we're all sitting in the hallway waiting to hear when the jury was going to be ready for us to go into the courtroom for them to deliberate.
They've already heard beforehand.
So they heard it on the radio, and then they got to hear it in real life in the courtroom, the guilty verdict. And then they told us that. They're like, this is weird. I'm like, what is going on? So I go to jail, right? And they shove me in solitary confinement, and then we appeal. And we get before the appeals courts, and we're out on not on bail, but on appeal conditions, which, by the way, one of them is really strange. It says any sign or of injury or illness, you need to go to the doctor. Now that literally, if one of our son's noses started running, you got to go to the doctor, right? So the doctor kept on saying, "Why are you here?" It's because we don't want to go to jail, right? Because we'll now be in contempt of that's up to 2 years in jail, right? And so now we're waiting the appeal, and we get into the Alberta appeals courts, and they do a dirty on us. And it was a 2-1 decision. The one judge was not willing to relent, and he was just saying no. You know, he even just quoted, says, you know, but by the grace of God go I by. Yeah. This couple, or based on the error in law that the judge made, the jury had no choice but to find this couple guilty, right? He clearly said that. He said the jury literally had no choice unless they were willing to go against the directives of the judge based on an error in law. So 2-1 decision. He decides for us. The other two say no. And the decision is finally rendered on November 15th, 2017, the due date of my daughter, Ella. And I'm saying, I'm not going in. My wife's ready to have a baby any moment now. And I'm supposed to go to jail again because they ruled against us. I'm not doing it. You can come and get me. Come and handcuff me, whatever, right? So I'm like, but what I will do is I'm going to write some scathing articles talking about this. And CBC picks up on it and they try to twist it, but they made the mistake of linking directly back to my Facebook page. Yes. And they would never make that mistake again, right? Yep. Because then people are like, what's this crazy doing? And then they click on it and realize.
Not crazy at all.
He's not crazy, yeah. Right? So they weren't yet trying to silence my voice at that point in time. They hadn't picked up on that yet. They weren't smart enough. They wouldn't do that until 2020 was the last report that they do on me when I called COVID a hoax, right? They only made that mistake once. So I don't go back to jail. The Crown comes back after this big uproar and they say, if you guys are appealing to the Supreme Court, we won't make your client go back to jail. He can just continue on with and at this point in time, the Crown has been unrelenting. Like they're as cruel as possible. All of a sudden they're being nice. Right? But it's because there's a black eye and people are saying, leave this couple alone.
Otherwise it's going to expose everything that we didn't want exposed, that the media has covered for us.
Yep. So then I'm like, okay, Alberta appeals courts, dirty, absolutely dirty. We had a judge who had a conscience who was not willing to compromise. That was our gateway into the Supreme Court. Supreme Court hears it. 2 of the judges have to recuse themselves because one of them was actually our lawyer for Truehope before Sean Buckley came on. That's why we ended up with Sean Buckley, is this lawyer became a judge and then would go on to become a Supreme Court justice, right? Okay. So she had to recuse herself, but they have to keep it an odd number. So then another one recused themselves. So we were down to 7. So now this is fast tracked and we're now in 2018, May of 2018. And we're standing before the Supreme Court. They hear the case. They unanimously decide it was a wrongful conviction. Quash the conviction is, I believe, what the exact term was, and order a new trial. I'm thinking, well, that's nice and all, a new trial, a fair trial this time. But where's my almost $1 million that we have spent up to this point?
Yep, feel you there.
Right? Where is it? I need it for another trial. I can't afford another trial.
Yep.
So then we had to fire our lawyers. Because I'm getting broke, right?
Yep.
And our fundraising had been shut down time and time again, right? So we couldn't fundraise.
Just like when the truckers' comedy thing happened, and GoFundMe just shut all the money out and block people. All this stuff is highly illegal and coerced. There's so much subterfuge going on here. Go ahead.
So we're broke, but I was feeling impressed that I needed to self-represent, but I didn't have the courage to take that step. I had to be shoved into that position. And so all the circumstances aligned that I had no choice but to fire my one lawyer, and Colette had a lawyer at this point in time. We weren't using Sean Buckley anymore. Sean Buckley was, my personal opinion, I think Sean came out of that 2016 trial saying, I don't want anything to do with anything. And so he had to have a break. He told us he was in retirement.
There's literally stress. He's back with the force because I think he just needed to. It's like you need some time to recuperate and then get the fire started. Then it really goes for it.
Well, I think he had to have a mind shift, recognizing the corruption that he was up against.
Yeah, it's intense. And okay, to spin off really quickly there, I think if people look and say, okay, is the government, because everybody wants to, this couldn't happen, but are governments for the people or to control the people? Any kind of government.
Well, break down the word govern
exactly
is control or force,
and the politics, the people,
mental, right? Mind.
It is mental. So everything is about psychological techniques, strategies, tactics, everything that have been learned through thousands, how many
millennia,
years, and every system it has all these deficits. All these people want to think, we'll switch from capitalism to communism, socialism, whatever. No, they all have horrible deficits. And they all have people at the top in shadow kind of thing that are pulling the strings because it's all about trying to control you. If you just see that, if you've been forced down situations like we have, I know a lot of you out there already are thinking that, but if you just look at that and you see how much money certain people have accumulated that they don't want to lose, and why would they even want that much money? That they're controlling all the media and everything through ownership through these investments. Again, you go back to BlackRock, Vanguard, State, things like that. They just control everything. Now they're buying up everything in monopolies in every industry. It's just happening. You just look at it. Yep. Once you look at it, you can never unsee it. But then everything starts to make sense when they're trying to control you. Anybody that thinks outside the box that starts to get an audience has got to be squashed. Now they're trying to put out fires everywhere because too many things got exposed slightly. And that's where I want to talk about when everybody says, what can we do? Or just go with the flow. By the way, going with the flow, if you study in ancient philosophy and religion, all the traditions, going with the flow does not mean following the people off the edge of the cliff. It means following your heart. And sometimes going with the flow means ferocity because that's what's necessary. And usually you don't want to be fierce sometimes because you think it's going to come back at you. Yeah. And the idea is we're just trying to ignite something in people saying, no, you can be fierce, and that is compassion.
You have to be.
You can't enable people you can't be passive all the time. That is not going with the flow. That is basically trying to escape it and not take any brunt because you're thinking more yourself. Everybody should be honest. When you say go with the flow, I don't want to get involved and be silent, does that mean that you're being the most helpful because you think it's wise or whatever, all the yoga and different traditions you've done? Or does actually the yoga and traditions say something totally different, but you don't want to hear that, so you make it your own and say, you know what? And you know what? When you said it's totally understandable to say, I can't handle this because, oh my God, you have to build yourself up. So nobody's saying anything. It's that. What I think there's a problem with is people that start mouthing off that are just following something that they don't understand.
Yep.
We're asking you, please stand down and let people that have actually gone down all the rabbit holes and the other side get into discourse with people in the way that don't understand things, and they start yapping off their opinions because they just followed an expert. That's actually really destructive to the whole process of community building. Yep. Because even right now, what I'm trying to appeal is that all you Health Canada people, anybody that might listen to this on either side of our podcast systems, right, is that we're trying to appeal to your humanity here. You know that a lot of people in your organization, in the government, and the corporations that you deal with in the pharmaceutical net, we're talking this industry in particular, is they're corrupt. And you see they're also power trippers, and you're just supposed to do what you're supposed to do. And that does not feel human. That's not right. That's not what's going to connect us. And so following because you don't understand what their methodology or their strategy tactics, you just say, I have to do this. But what if it comes from a really ill intent? It's malicious, like you were talking about earlier, and then you just follow it top down. we're destroying society, and we're people, and we recognize you as people, and we want to have discourse, proper discourse. And I feel like we both being involved with Sean Buckley, and now that he's come to like going for it, and it's not about money, it's definitely like a spiritual mission. We all come from different traditions, but from the depths, we're all understanding each other. We're going for the same heartfelt mission, is trying to raise everybody up, trying to empower everyone again to stop listening and stop following this authoritative kind of thing that we've been trapped into for so many decades, hundreds, thousands of years. Is right now it seems to be like a mass upheaval of distrust, in everything, left, right, center, all the saying none of it actually makes sense. And we're just giving you examples here of how bad it can get. But if we all start standing, they can't put out that many fires. Then things are going to change. And then I feel like we can come together again. And forgiveness is a huge part of that. The last 5 years, there's horrible stuff said about both of us and our families and everything. That whatever, it's because people get trapped in fear and really good divide and conquer tactics. And we've been indoctrinated for so long. Now's the time to get out of the boxes. So sorry, I just wanted to break off into that little rant.
Well, that's a great point, especially, the whole thing was really great. But I want to touch on that going with the flow thing. The principle that I'm about to lay out also applies to surfing, about being pummeled by waves, but I'm a whitewater kayaker.
Yep.
And you don't go with the flow. Going with the flow does not mean lifting up the paddle and just coasting. If you want a beating, that's exactly how you're going to get a beating. You're going to get caught in, on an eddy line. You're going to get flipped around, right? You have to be oftentimes in control to really go with the flow. You've got to be using some muscle, right? And you're paddling to make sure that you're going down the right portion. Otherwise, you're going to get caught in a hole. And I've been there. Yeah. Right.
I'm just imagining all the other guys tumbling under the water when they pull themselves up. There's no balance there.
Right. Like you know the course, and you want to go with that flow, you've got to direct it. And that's going to take some muscle. You want to catch a wave surfing? That's not just going to passively happen. Be like, oh, here's the wave coming. Get on the board. No, you've got to paddle hard.
There's skill involved.
Yeah, exactly.
Wisdom, anticipation, skill. It's all involved. It's two wings of the bird. Wisdom and skill. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And just like surfing, two wings of the bird, right? Like, so... so going back to 2018, basically, we're firing our lawyers. They're not willing to deal with the corruption that we've discovered. And by this point in time, my brother Brad has a team, and they're going through the medical files with a fine-tooth comb to find the deficiencies. And they are finding all sorts of stuff, including we're getting closer to the causation of the emergent situation that Ezekiel found himself in. And these are needles in a haystack that they are not talking about, nothing to see here, and they're avoiding, but they know it. The medical system knows it, but the problem is it highlights the criminal negligence resulting in death because, let's put out a hypothetical here. That's not so hypothetical. You end up with a child that has an electrolyte imbalance, and it causes disruption in the muscle function of his heart and whatnot, and it starts to go a little bit wonky. Well, that's an easy correctable condition if you can get the patient stabilized. Yeah. But you can't stabilize a patient if you don't have the right equipment. So an easily correctable situation arises, and they are deficient in the equipment, constituting criminal negligence resulting in death. Now they're avoiding the true cause, and they're going all over the place, including we end up with medical files that were initially withheld that say that they've already ruled out meningitis or any infection, and they're looking for an alternative cause as to why he passed, and they're going so far as to look at the supplements he was on to see if any of that would cause it. They are looking for any plausible alternative to absolve themselves of any responsibility and to criminalize us. Well, they end up having to go the bacterial meningitis route and fabricate this whole thing that pops up in 2016. It's fallacious. We end up in our second trial in 2019. It's fallacious. It becomes even more abundantly clear. I cross-examine the medical examiner who refuses to give a clear answer. It takes 5 days to cross-examine him to try to get the truth out of him. Everybody's frustrated, but the process had to happen because I would ask him a simple question. It should be a yes or no. And he would go into this long-winded, deflectionary, let's avoid the actual core substance of the question and let's confuse you over here. And I'm having to hone him back in and rein him back in. And he's getting frustrated saying, you didn't answer the question. I'm looking, did this happen? Yes or no, whatever. Judge is getting incredibly frustrated with him. So 5 days later, he's finally off the hook, right? 5 days of cross-examining this guy who's trying to hide the truth as to why my son ended up in the situation he was. That would ultimately just bury the case. Well, during this time, during 2016 and 2019, they're turning this case into the biggest, because they can't go vaccine anymore. So they're actually making it the biggest choice of care case in Canada, which means there's criminal liability surrounding your choice to choose natural medicine over allopathic medicine. That's why they continued on with it, and they turned it into that. So now every naturopathic doctor in the country knows my name, and they either love or hate me, because the very question about naturopaths being licensed is coming into question based off of our trial.